Development Committee for Bronx Community Board
Where
1.
are you? Oh, I'm looking for the
Thank
HCMI
you
here.
everyone for
Offices,
joining. Happy
offices.
New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy Three Kings Day.
Hopefully we'll have our office
What is it?
again soon, but thank you for showing up tonight here. We don't have a quorum. We don't have all of our members. We don't have any voting items, but the information that you'll be sharing with us tonight is very important. And we really want to extend
He says it's on
This-
the
information to all of our members. So I am joined by my co-chair, Susan Camerata, and other fellow committee members. And hopefully we'll get to ask questions that can bring more clarity to those other members that were not able to join this evening, and we'll just take it from here. Also for tonight, I want to discuss with our members some of our upcoming priorities. We do have a lot of requests for not only presentations but organizations asking us to engage in several activities, and then just to follow up on previous conversations we had about some of the goals for our committee. So hopefully we'll get to discuss some of that as we move forward with 2025. So thank you so much. I would like to give Yeah, who's here from the Lincoln Hospital? Who's the representative?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting the meeting tonight. Thank you, really appreciate it.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, you know, so it's like
Thank you so
we are
much.
from Administration of Public Affairs. Yes.
Thank
Also,
you.
I think we have like a strong like a partnership with the Community Board number 1, the district manager. Also, he's part of the Income Community Advisory Board. He's our member. So welcome to the
Thank
district
you.
first
Thank
committee
you.
meeting.
Appreciate
I'm
it.
not done, that's Marcelo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you,
Sorry,
thank
we get to keep one.
Do we have our
I'll make sure to
agenda,
practice tomorrow.
Stephen? Okay, do we have an agenda? Okay, not a problem, but we do have the presentation, so only those two things, the presentation and then discussing this rubric, so we can start talking about priorities for the committee for the next year. Okay, so,
Madam Chair, I was reminded that we are broadcasting live on the Bronx Community Board 1 and YouTube channel. So please make sure to speak clearly and concisely so that for those who are in our social media and our remote world can be able to clearly and concisely understand what you're saying, and also that we are recording this conversation for our official minutes. Thank you, Chair.
okay, so why don't we introduce ourselves, starting from my left and then to my right.
Stephen Palmer's Community Coordinator, Bronx Community Board 1.
Anthony Jordan, District Manager to the Board, Bronx Community Board 1.
Paola Martinez, Chair for the Housing and Economic Development Committee.
Susan Camerata, Vice Chair of the Land Use and Economic Development Committee.
Delorny Namorin, member of this committee and chair of policy, legislation, and bylaws committee.
Rena A.G. Hemmings. I am the liaison from Department of City Planning, so I'm happy to hear about this project. I'm
Ted
forgettable now.
Ted Weinstein, Director of HPD, Director of Bronx Planning.
Astor Marcos Stewart, HPD Senior Planner.
Adam Beckerman, so Senior Planner at HPD.
Peter Presida Development Group. Christopher Jones, Map Architects, architect of the project.
Jessica Clemente, we stay nos quedamos.
Dr. Mark Gonzalez, we stay nos quedamos.
Jeremy Stand Development and Consulting.
Can you repeat that?
Jeremy Stand from Stand Development and Consulting.
Thank you. Okay, so you can take it off.
Great. Well, thank you again so much for having us. Again, I'm Adam Beckerman, for the Bronx office, and I'm just going to give a brief introduction, a little of the project history, and then I'm going to hand it over to the development team to share more about the project details. So we're here today just for an informational presentation about the Melrose Cornerstone B2 project. This is a 214 unit, 100% affordable project, and in the Melrose Commons area, specifically in the Melrose Commons urban renewal area. Now this project has been a long time coming because this was originally part of the Cornerstone 3 RFP, which was released back in 2003. So there was 4 sites that eventually became 5 sites. This is site B, which eventually was B1 and B2. So this is the B2 site. And as I mentioned, you can go to the next slide. This is just an informational presentation, but we will eventually be back in a few months, hopefully in certifying in ULERP. So we just wanted to give you a heads up. Some of the land use actions for this project is 1, a special permit or certification for development over a railroad or a transit right of way. So part of the site, why Peter can describe this a little bit later. Part of the reason why it took so long to develop is there was a railroad trench on it, but it's not an HPD ownership, so that's why we can proceed. Disposition of city-owned land, designation of an urban development action area or UDAP, and to amend the Melrose Commons Urban Renewal Plan to allow modification of height. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Peter to describe the project more.
Jessica, do you want to do a quick intro?
Yes, that's fine. Hello again, everyone. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the development team, and then, of course, the role that Nos Quedamos is playing as part of this process. So the development team includes Preceded Development, Nos Quedamos, MAP, and Stand Development. Architects, Magnuson Architecture and Planning. The legal team is Goldstein Hall, and the general contractor will be Preceded Construction. Property management team has not been determined as of yet, but will soon. And the social service provider would be Nos Quedamos. So as you may or may not know, Nos Quedamos is an organization that's been based in the Melrose Commons section for over 30 years, and has been directly responsible for the Melrose Urban Renewal Plan as a whole for this community. So we're invested in not only just the planning process that's community driven, but also in providing and securing affordable housing that meets the needs of the local community, working in partnership with longstanding partners that we've had for 20 plus years. So happy to be a part of this team to see this project finally come to fruition. And so I'll pass the baton now back over to Peter.
Back to me. Well, thank you everybody again. Peter Presido with Presido Development. Presido has been a Bronx-based business since the early 1970s. I'm part of the 4th generation in the family business. We are a general contractor and developer with a lot of experience in the Bronx. This site we've been working on, as everyone's mentioned, for 20-something years. There was a big delay due to the rail trench that runs through the middle of the site. Back in 2020, the city, through our help, was able to determine that in the 50s, there was a quitclaim deed where the trench was actually owned by the city, not by the guy who thought he owned it. At some point in 2021, DOT ended up filling in what were considered bridges along 3rd Avenue and Brook. So now we have the ability to fill in the trench, which makes construction viable. At a previous point, there was no ability to build on one side of the trench because it was a very small sliver, and with building on the other side of the trench wasn't really feasible. We previously presented this site to CB1 back in November of 2021. I believe we met twice since then, but I can't actually find it in my record, so consider this our second intro meeting. The plan for the site is to develop a 214-unit, 20-story building with about 4,000 feet of ground floor retail. The units will range from studios to 3-bedroom apartments, and they'll be affordable to formerly homeless households up to 80% of AMI. We are cognizant of providing family-sized units. We think they lease better. We think they're more stable residents, and we think there's more demand for them. And so HPD's minimum is 30% of your units to be 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom apartments. We're at 46%. We think that's incredibly important. This is being developed under the most affordable option that HPD has, which is the ELA program. And we are hoping to certify for ULERP at some point in the middle of this year. On the next page, which is page 5, you can see in the blue border the Melrose Commons Urban Renewal Plan. The red sites are sites that Proceed has developed. Most recently, just outside of the zone, we developed the Food Bazaar up on 163rd, and we've also highlighted sites A, B, C, and D, Melrose Court, and a number of other sites in the area.
These are existing partnerships.
Those are all existing partnerships with Nostradamus and the balance of the team. Here's an aerial plan where you can see the site. There's a lot of overgrowth, so you can't actually see the trench that I was talking about, but you can see the 42nd Precinct, Plaza de Los Angeles, the Aurora, Dorado, Orion, and La Terraza, which are sites A, B, C, and D. I wasn't around for the naming, so I don't necessarily know how all of that came to pass, but Dorado is site D, so that one at least made sense to me. On the following slide, which is slide 7, you can see the ground floor plan. We've got about 4,000 feet of commercial running on 3rd Avenue up to the corner. On the ground floor on the residential side, which will enter off Brook, which is more of a quiet street to keep residents from having to come in on a busy street, have more active commercial storefront on 3rd Avenue. We have 3 elevators for the residents, along with a laundry room on the ground floor and a community room, both of which have direct access to an outdoor terrace, which will be landscaped. And then there's 1 unit on the ground floor, which is for the live-in super. There'll be a package room, a social service office, and a bike room all on the ground floor. Slide 8 shows the typical floor. We get natural light into the elevator lobbies, which you can see right in the middle of the page. And then, the units are fairly standard for HPD layouts. The HPD design guidelines have pretty strict limits between minimum and maximum sizes, and we're adhering to those. We're still in very early schematic design phase, so these unit layouts could shift for ADA reasons as well. On slide 9, you can see the unit breakdown both by bedroom size and by affordability. And you'll see that we have formerly homeless households all the way up to 80% of AMI, with 50% of the units being at or below 50% of AMI. And again, 46% of the units will be for 2 and 3 bedroom apartments. On the roof, we're working with Nostradamus to program this space. We're hoping to have a production farm for residents to grow fruits and vegetables for their own use or for putting back into the community. We're still trying to figure out all the details around that and the design on the space, but it will be a fantastic view for the residents, being up above the balance of the area. And then on slide 11, you can see some zoomed out renderings, which show the building both looking to the south, where you can see the Manhattan skyline, and then to the north west, on the right hand side of the page, where you can see solar. The building is being built to Passive House standards. It will be built as a poured-in-place concrete job, and that's sort of it. I want to open it up for questions from the board.
Oh, okay. All right. Couple of things. Is the social service office, is that going to be manned by Nostradamus? Okay.
For the R-Space residents as well as providing services.
So for all of the,
For
for all of the residents?
Yes.
Generally, okay. And one of the things, Peter, that has come up with the board as a whole and the committee is the size of the apartments.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I know that we got to get as many apartments in there as possible for financing purposes. But, where are you in that? I mean, so for the 2-bedroom, how big are they?
I'd have Chris answer that. I would just state that we are, I think the range that we're allowed to be in on a 2-bedroom is about 100 feet.
Yeah.
But off the top of my head, I don't know what the
So the minimums for a 2-bedroom per HPD's design guidelines is 675, and the largest is 750. You're allowed a little bit of extra space if it's an accessible UFAS.
That's square footage.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you get an extra 25 square feet if it's a UFAS designated fully accessible unit. You're allowed to go up to 775. So all of our 2 bedrooms are, I want to say, in the middle of that range.
So about
So
700?
about 700 square feet, maybe slightly more. But we've got we haven't started MEP design, we haven't started ADA reviews or anything like that, so those numbers will fluctuate a little bit.
I would just make a comment. I mean, I'd wait for Paola, but I know that we have talked in the committee many times about just it's hard to raise it's hard to raise a family in a 2-bedroom apartment,
We understand that,
And I understand all that. I'm just laying it out there. It's just making a statement, I
if we
guess.
put a 400 or a 800 square foot 2-bedroom out there, we would get rejected by HPD.
I know.
And,
Yeah, and I mean, as a person who's lived in a few apartments, 750 could be a really good layout, depending on how it's laid out. So, and I do want to commend you guys on having so many 2 and 3 bedrooms. That is a
big deal.
Big deal for us. So I want to commend you on that. I do want to ask a few questions about when do you guys, you guys haven't done, you guys are here, so I don't want to say you haven't done much, but when are you guys looking to start construction at least?
So if Euler starts in June, Euler plus or minus 9 months, the earliest. Basically, this will be in HPD's bond allocation. The earliest that could happen would be June of 2026. I think more realistically, you'd have to talk to HPD. If I got to decide we'd start a lot faster. But that's timeline, I think, will become far clearer when we get in front of you for Euler. I think the earliest of June 26 is highly unlikely. Sometime in late 26 or 27 is probably a more realistic estimate, but I'd defer to Adam and Ed and the team.
Also, and I wanted to ask, how did the city of how did that impact you here?
Maybe it might be easier.
Yeah. So one of the ways it's impacted is
I know, she's here.
on the special permit for the right of railroad right of way. Adam and I have been communicating, and we're still because City of Yes was just voted on December 5th.
Right.
So we're still trying to figure out exactly which projects are in the timeline, and based on this, we have been, we've done stuff with HPD and we are still kind of going along with it. But so that would be the biggest change, that one. That tends to be a bit of a hurdle. So now it turned into a less cumbersome requirement for them for this application.
Oh, for this special permit. But will it change the configuration of the buildings at all, or?
No, this is adjusted for City of Yes. So we
it did.
We had a
Okay.
previous
So you
design,
did. Okay.
and that's what we presented. We had something
In 2021.
yeah.
Okay.
And then with City of Yes, it grew by about 50 units.
That's pretty substantial.
Yeah, for an R8 zoning district, the
Yeah.
City of Yes.
So this is
Yes.
the universal affordability preference, which
Okay.
allows for the bump. So, and the bump is permanently affordable.
Got it.
So in regards to your commercial, this huge commercial space, it's ginormous, which I'm assuming is, okay, so I live in Orion. I don't know what building that is.
Orion.
I don't know what Orion, I don't know what letter that is, but
It was
it's
C.
C, okay, because I didn't pick the names. So I live in C, and so even though it's one commercial space, that's, I'm assuming, gonna be broken down to multiple commercial spaces, but more than anything, I know exactly what's on the hub because I live on the hub and I live on 3rd Avenue. And so one question I have is for the unhoused people who's going to get units, is that supportive housing or just people who have been, in the shelter system for 6 months or whatever the case may be for qualification? So it's not at all supportive housing. Okay.
So we are looking for opportunities to look at aged out youth.
Okay.
And certain populations
Okay.
that we know have been underhoused.
That makes sense. Because our board and has big feelings about supportive housing and more supportive housing type populations in the community, because we feel like we're overburdened with that specifically in the neighborhood.
No, we
If I
are
may,
meeting.
it's people-
Go ahead.
It's people from the shelters,
Yeah.
the people who have been determined by social services can live independently.
Yes.
Yes.
And then I know this is also the location of this. There's a lot of housing people in this area. So I don't know what construction's going to be really cumbersome to the community.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, like, what is protocol around that when there's construction in such a place that is highly populated like this?
Yeah, we have the school across the street. We have the cops across the street on the other side of
They're
Third.
still going to be there?
They're not moving.
Well, some of them.
Some of them are. There's a bunch of different DOB regulations that we have to follow.
Okay.
Certain hours of operations,
Okay.
certain, which will drag on construction longer than it
Yeah.
probably should, but there's a lot of different things that'll be in place. I think our hours will get limited because of the school across the street. What we're trying to deal with mostly, and our biggest challenge, is that this whole sidewalk on Brook Avenue is a bridge, essentially. It's all, like, if you are, since you're in the neighborhood, if you walk down there, you can see that it's supported by steel beams that go across this trench that's 25 feet deep. So we're coordinating with DOT how we fill this in, how we deal with all of that, and keep pedestrians safe throughout the process of construction. So it's a bit of a, we've started that coordination process. It'll be a lot of fun dealing with all of these various agencies on that one. But it will, at the end of the day, get the maintenance issue off of DOT's hands and bring all these units into play.
Chair?
Yes.
Thank you. So, thank you and welcome everyone. So given that the Melrose Commons plan has been something that's been happening in this community for a long time, and thanks to the legacy of North Columbus's founder on making sure that work has been done and working with partners over a period of time. What are some of the lessons that have been learned from the history of this project, from when we first began to where we are now, that we're interested in learning? Like, how have you been talking to your tenants that are currently in some of your properties and some of the neighbors and so on that you're looking at as you continue to build in this community?
Yeah, and I think it's not only this community, but it's kind of across the city. Talking to our residents, because I think a lot of the problems that we see are not only, most of what we do is in the Bronx. And I don't want to generalize everybody in the Bronx is the same in Community Board 1, 5, or 9, or whichever, but a lot of the problems are there. What we see is that there's a need for lower income housing. There's a need for helping residents with recertifications and things of that nature. We hear the same things that you guys hear in terms of the units are too small. We need access to this, and that, whether that be broadband, which is now something that we're doing as part of HPD's program, that everybody's gonna have free broadband. Whether that's access to more services, and that's something that Nostradamus will be helping to provide. And so we're trying to be responsive to those while sort of coloring within the lines that we have as it relates to the programs that are laid out by HPD.
So you want to add more?
Yeah,
Sure.
I'll just add a little bit more. There's also like this need to wanna coming out of COVID, right? So COVID had a number of impacts around food security, and that's where the kind of rise of green rooftop spaces where we're producing food has become more and more important. We have a pilot project that we're doing in El Jardín de Celine to really kind of get a sense of how can we make that a replicable model. And we want to be able to bring that here, because access to food and quality foods, but also building self-sufficiency in community, right? I think that's really part of the primary kind of pillars and principles, right? How are we making sure that we can stabilize families, how we can do so in a way that what they're kind of growing and cultivating is connected to culture and kind of medicinal well-being and betterment. That's one thing. The other thing has been around, and we've been talking about this collective as a team. This is not possible here, but like home ownership, like pathways to home ownership, and how do we increase more of that opportunity? Of course, as more programs become available, we can look at, how we can integrate that. But pathways to homeownership is something that we find that's been important and is part of the urban renewal plan's legacy by having homeownership like the Orion, right, and other parts of the homeownership that's throughout the Melrose Commons. Is important to preserve that too. So that's something that we are hearing and really trying to do our best to advocate to identify opportunities that help families along that journey.
So I asked that. I'm going to continue.
Yes, sir.
So I hear access to services, larger apartments, food pantry for food insecurity, self-sufficiency, and home ownership. I just asked that when you come back to do talk about in the ULIP process, you dig deeper and be more specific about what that actually means to the community, because the community, this board will want to hear more about what that reality is, so they truly hear you. And while I appreciate that these things are things that you heard, that it is really important to know in the weeds what that actually will mean on the ground to Jane and Joe Nickbone, who are looking to have access to services. What are those services? What do you identify what they may or may not be? And have there been lessons learned and all these things that maybe don't work and other projects that you may or may have not been involved as you talk to your other partners that are around the community. There are some things I hear that we refer to HPD about apartment size and everything else, but we always are looking at ways that we don't debunk what HPD has in place, but where you're thinking outside the line necessarily instead of operating within the guidelines or the guardrails that the city has put out, because it doesn't necessarily put you out of compliance to receive access to financing, but it allows you to know that you are truly understanding what the constituents' fears may be. When you hear large apartments, you hear parking. The city time and time again has ignored the community's concerns about parking or access to alternative transportation, meaningful transportation that really is working to get people back and forth to be able to afford the higher rents that are, or the rents period that are there in the community. Those are important. And then how are we doing more to ensure that we get to understand what are the concerns that folks take to the dinner table on an ongoing basis. I wanted to talk about now to have a commercial space this big, you have to have thought who would have been the potential renter. So not looking to identify that today because again, like you said, these things are not permanent. But I'm assuming that you are looking.
We have some thoughts. You know, we just released the space at the Aurora, which is just across the street. You know, and it's hard, right? Because nobody is coming to me today to say, here's 4,000 feet. I want to lease this in 2029, 2030, right? Like nobody knows what the market's going to look like then, which is challenging. But, you know, Precita's been active in leasing retail in the neighborhood, mostly through my Aunt Christine, for the better part of 30 something years. So, you know, we've got a decent handle on who the players are in the market, and we'll continue to, you know, keep a tight lid on that. But, you know, I think it'd be irresponsible to tell you that I had somebody.
Oh, for sure. But and I get it too.
But I won't have that.
We're hearing that a lot of our commercial. We're not mindful of the fact that we understand a lot of people are concerned about taking on commercial property, given the other social and health conditions that we have happening in this community that's going on, like open drug use amongst other things that's happening. The instances of that the city has not been working enough to get their hands around providing solutions and working to be able to provide solutions for that. So we know that is a hard thing. We hear from other related management, a bunch of property managers who all day continue to say, I had someone who's going to sign a lease. They came to the neighborhood to do a site visit. They decided not to move forward with the project. So we know that it's going to be difficult. And this is going to be an extreme investment for whoever decides to come into this space, whatever it be. And you want to make sure you meet as you grow the community with more individuals. What is you have enough? Maybe you have enough supermarkets, you have enough this, you have enough that. You try to make sure you have somebody who's going to be able to be there for at least for anywhere between a 5 and a 10-year lease.
Right, and I think it's highly likely that this ends up getting chopped into 2 to 4 different spaces.
Right, and that's the idea, right? And maybe and my colleagues who always say they're looking for a great family eat space.
We have no sit-down restaurants. We have 0 sit-down restaurants on the avenue. That is very annoying to me. For the amount of residents that live there.
Right.
We have no, like, I understand, like, you mean, we have Marshalls, we have grocery stores, we have every phone company, it feels like, but we have no sit-down restaurants, and we have all these schools and all these apartments, homes, family homes, which means owners, and no sit-down restaurant. Obviously,
Right.
it needs to be chopped up. Like,
Sure.
that's my message.
And we're going and we have a hibachi restaurant that's opening up pretty soon next door to us. So
Which I also think is too damn big.
But
Oh, I want to just share my idea while I'm here. My food court idea.
Okay.
Sorry. I know you talked about, I think we should have a food court. This one is really far, but the hibachi, the former Walgreens, should have been a food court with various small eateries, and people could go and buy food like they have them in the city everywhere, where like there's 5 small restaurants, bars, whatever, in one space.
We'd do a lot better with that if we were 10 blocks out.
Yeah, they're really too far. The hibachi place needs to swap with you guys. I'm like hibachi. Okay, anyways, now.
Or even a movie theater, which we lost, and depending how it was, we broke up to multiple space that people had cool jobs and a place to go and spend time with family. So that's the idea. Also, I know that you gave numbers regarding what the percentages are under the AMI. Just ask that next time you come back, if you present actual rent rolls, what the numbers are, because that helps people who don't understand the AMI formula to understand what the actual rents are to be charged. Yes, we are excited about larger families being able to find a place to stay here. Some people want to go as high as 4 bedrooms, but we know that you're trying to get the most, so the building ends up paying for itself. And so, we're glad that you're able to build such a larger portfolio of what that would be. I'm rounding up my questions, Chair. Thank you for now. When we talked about the green roof, do you know? Do you give an example? Who's operating that? Is the residents operating that, or is the nonprofit operating the green
That'll be in
roof?
partnership with the residents. Nos quedamos en the residents.
So it's kind of like Vita Verde, where they're growing like pears and apples and stuff like that, and then kind of like
Distributing it through the
distributing it out,
building. And
cultural
store.
sensitive and everything else.
Sure.
So it speaks to the people's diet. Great. Yeah, I want to reserve my questions for another time in the rain, but thanks to Chair for her time. But this is my passion. You've already know of understanding housing. So this is, I'm going to probably likely have more questions, and I'll thank the Chair for the time.
Sure. My apologies. The legislature started session today, so I had a few members calling for some matters. So my apologies for stepping out. But I appreciate your questions. I'm wondering.
Did you may have more
Do
questions?
we take more questions?
Yeah, I
have one too.
Go ahead.
Well, you go ahead, Lenny.
I just wanted to say, I think I've talked, like, Jeff and I will talk about this. One of the things I think, this is not an owner, this is a rental property, but for your buildings that you guys own, that was part of this plan, I think checking up on those buildings as a person who's on a condo board right now is really important about like preservation of buildings.
Yes.
Like, at this point, Orion's maybe 15, 17 years old. And I think people were excited to buy, but people don't understand that, it costs money to maintain a building, and, roofs, boilers, things break, and that costs money. And I think knowing how to manage a building as an owner, I think is something that many people may not have, depending on your experience, your life skills. And I think, people are so excited to own, and I don't know if they know how much it takes to maintain. And I think that'd be also a good way to talk about to reintroduce yourself to some of these buildings and some of these developments, and maybe having workshops on how to preserve buildings. I know some of I think we are okay because it's my building, but but I do think I think someone was talking walking into some of these buildings, they don't look as good as they used to look, and some of that is even if you have a management company, some of that is the owners need to know how to run a building and what things cost, and contractors, who's going to assess the building, when to plan for a building, I think some of that would be very useful for the developments that are like owner developments, and a good way to really integrate the new owner, the people who would have bought Sense, to meet Nos Quedamos and know the history, and also to offer services to them. because I think owners can use services as well.
Absolutely.
And things of that nature, both on the finance side, because I want our reserves to be good enough so people can buy with low down deposit. And obviously, I want all things to work. So I think that's an idea. I think for even this is the last project, that there's still things in sustaining it. I think is really important. Okay, that's just all.
Going back to this building, what are your security plans?
So we take that.
I'm sorry?
Okay, RG.
Yeah, something like that.
It's definitely something that we take pretty seriously. We do fobs at every door. We do fobs on every elevator. There's cameras in every stairwell, on landings and exits. We try and get every hallway. Cameras and fobs and that stuff are great, but if somebody wants to break in and do whatever they want to do, it's not going to prevent it. But we try and, prevention is the best for it. It's trying to deter it. But
There's a package room.
Yeah.
there's a package room, so packages will be secured within a room where somebody walking by on the street's not going to be able to see it.
For your neighbor,
Right.
Okay.
But it's not totally,
secure.
foolproof, right?
Yes.
Like if you wanted to walk into the package room, we've done it both ways where we've had the lockers,
Like an Amazon locker.
like an Amazon locker, or we've had just like a room where the UPS guy comes in and puts the shelves for, the fifth floor. This is over here. And, both works and have some of their problems because it's an Amazon locker. The FedEx guy doesn't want to put his box into the Amazon thing, or if the UPS guy shows up with 20 boxes for the building, he doesn't want to spend
Sorting.
50 minutes sitting there saying, all right, this is for 2F. And, it becomes a job of the property manager and the super, but it's important and it deters theft and keeps people safe and all that stuff. And, packages and trash are very important. You'll see that the trash room has direct egress onto 3rd Avenue. So one, we're keeping the trash out of the lobbies to keep the lobbies clean as possible. We're doing collections of boxes up on every floor and then bringing them down. We do have plans to install balers for boxes to keep them smaller. We think is going to be a DASNY or a sanitation department requirement in the next few years. We've been putting that in a bunch of buildings. So that trash is important to them.
Trash. So both security and trash are important. I'm a big believer of cameras and fobs all over the place.
Yeah.
And are you going to have a service like monitoring it, or what are you doing, or is it?
Right now, we're not doing third-party monitoring services, but it's definitely something that we've been exploring more and more throughout our portfolio.
I'd love for you to consider it. I think it's a big difference. I could tell you at some of our sites. I mean, getting the alerts when there is someone who is not following the rules, or smoking in the hallway, or who broke that lock, and you have them on the video and you're getting it in real time, is a big difference. And you are talking about over 200 households here.
It's
so it's a huge
that we've been toying with for a while.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to go back in.
It's almost
dig through
impossible.
The data to find out who smoked in, who was smoking in the elevator last night between 10 and 2. Like somebody has to sit there on the thing and push fast forward and then try and figure out who it is.
Because that's a lot of the complaints that we get is, so, okay, you have the cameras, but who's looking at it, right? And who's enforcing that?
Right.
And again, it's a part of safety for everybody and, a feeling of security in the building. Trash is a big deal as well, just getting it out of the building and in a secure place and, compacting it more, and just the whole trash system. So will you have extra personnel? Like how many staff are you thinking of having here?
For 215 units, we'll probably have either 4 or 5 staff. One might be a part-time equivalent. So you'll have a super, a handyman, and, you know, a couple of porters.
Again, I'm just gonna say, from experience, it's tough, you know, and I know it's, I go by the rule, 50 units, one staff person, but, pulling the trash, if you're pulling the trash, you can't clean the building, and and I know this is another HPD thing too, because they look at how many people you're allocating to it. But again, if we don't speak up and, start talking about these things, nothing changes, right? So if somebody, like I said, if somebody's pulling, especially with, the times now of trash pickup and whatnot, somebody's doing that, they're not cleaning the building.
Yep.
It's it's a big circle, but, I'm thankful that you're at least looking at it and, being realistic. And I think something like that, bringing it back to the full committee and the full board, I think is going to be important too.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
Here. So Chair, do you have a question? Oh.
I was gonna say, something we've been talking about as a committee is trash. I know there's gonna be a commercial space, there's also gonna be a community service space, and that side of the neighborhood isn't really that messy. It's really the other side that is full of trash. But, that porter working the outside of the neighborhood, the sidewalks of the building, especially this is a big corner lot, it, really helps the entire community, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so we, that is important to us. It's just that, cleaner neighborhoods tend to have obviously those buildings have more staff cleaning and things of that nature. And so that is something in the community, is that especially that 3rd Avenue, there's going to be bus stops, and, people that has enough that it not only helps your residents, but being a friendly neighbor is something that we've talked about in trying to help our sanitation crisis in our neighborhood.
I have a question. I think this is more so for HPD, because you're gonna go through the Housing Connect portal to
Yes.
lease these units. And I feel like so much, perhaps that is something that we could explore further in this committee. My question is with regards to leasing these units through Housing Connect, and then ensuring that while people will know that there will be social services on site, how do you plan to prevent people falling into arrears? And to HPD, the question is, what is, in your experience or based on the data that you have, once we have new buildings, right? People come with 0 arrears. Have we conducted any information, or do we have data that tells us, in 2-3 years, this is the proportion of people that fall behind in the rent and stuff like that? Because I
Part
feel
of the
like
question you had for a long time.
because I
I've
just feel
got
like
some data on it, not like actual that I could, but it happens really quickly.
It does.
You get people who move in and stop paying rent immediately. And whether that's they don't want to pay rent and they want to drag you through the court process, or they can't, it's kind of hard to tell. But I'm sure Susan sees this more than probably anybody in the city. So I would almost guarantee that she's got probably the best data out of anybody.
It's very difficult.
what protocol do we take knowing that people get through Housing Connect? You have leasing agents doing all of these pre-qualification and stuff, because it is a problem.
It's
in our
actually sad.
community.
It's very sad.
People start off from a presumption, not just presumption, but that it's affordable, that they can pay because they're paying 30%. No, it's everybody ends up having to pay 30% of roughly 30% of their income, and it's just accepted for decades now that is an acceptable amount to pay. So when people come in, there should be no problem with them paying with that amount. Now, if they are stretching it, if they're trying to skimp, if they have new expenses, unexpected expenses, those are things that can't be projected. Who has no problem paying these $2,000 the rest of the time, or as opposed to the next person who might have problems. But it's not really a Housing Connect issue, because like I said, everybody starts off paying that percentage.
But I mean, I think Paola makes a very good point in the sense that, even maybe through like Nostradamus or, even maybe adding something into the lease or, like just information if you're falling behind. The problem is that try to catch somebody quick. Right? I mean, there are people who intentionally don't pay, right? But there are people who, like you said, fall into a situation because of other issues that come up in their home life, which is where a Nostradamus comes into play, right? And getting people to be forthright and talk about that. A lot of people, again, they have that pride. They just rather see the bill, and they know the system. I mean, we are in a system in the city which is, resident tenant oriented. The courts, you could basically stay there for almost 2 years without paying your rent.
I mean, who are
It's
you?
very-
I'm sorry. Who are you considering as your property managers? I'm not sure if someone asked.
We haven't really had that conversation yet.
And I'm sorry, I think I'm missing this, but when are you expecting to have these completed and fully leased?
Leased. So I think I answered this a little earlier. We are hoping to certify for ULERP at some point in the middle of this year. Assuming that takes, 9 months, which is about the clock, we'd be done early next year. The earliest we could close based on the size of the deal and the type of financing would be June of next year. That's highly unlikely. My optimistic bet would be the end of 2027 we could start, but
Start construction.
Start the construction.
and construction's probably for
2 years.
this at least probably 2.5, maybe 3
Yeah,
years.
yeah.
Can we recommend partnerships also for labor? Are you doing union or not?
This is non-union.
Non-union.
Yeah.
Can we submit recommendations to hire? I mean, to partner up with organizations that train workers.
Yeah, we do a lot of worker training in the Bronx. We meet all of our WMBE requirements. We do a lot of local hiring in the Bronx, and have a ton of experience with that. But yeah, we're happy to take recommendations on that type of stuff.
Yeah, because, let's make a note of that. And
Just
also,
mention-
I think it's important to advertise for folks. I mean, I'm thinking about younger people. I know there's a bunch of organizations that do the OSHA trainings and stuff, but I'm also thinking that perhaps as we look into our priorities, there's a lot of organizations that are used to work with certain populations, maybe the older folks, but I don't see a lot of people with a focus on like the younger generations that want to learn something and, vocational training and stuff like that, that perhaps we have some time between now and then. You can just say it.
So okay, so like youth bill. Basically, there's a lot of organizations that work with youth bill, and that's usually the GC or the construction group works to try to partner to invite youth build opportunities to allow young people to do minor but impactful contributions to the construction of a site to allow them to earn the real work experience and these youth build young people are OSHA certified before coming to a job site, and that's usually something. And as we talk about the GC, one of the things we always talk about is ensuring local, encouraging local hiring with the contractors that you go with to do construction. Since you're definitely not doing compelling wage union opportunities that are or apprentice opportunities, that you encourage your idea to whatever GC you go to or construction person go to, constantly looking at how those are looking to do as much local hiring as reasonably possible. And I say that has Preceda or either any of the groups enter a binding community-based agreement that stipulates certain things in its past projects? And so can you give an example?
I don't believe so. Like, we've been based in the Bronx on 173rd between Park and Washington since the early 70s. We do a lot of local hiring in the Bronx. I would put our track record up against almost anybody. We hire a number of people, not only for ourselves, but also for subs. A number of our people who start as laborers picking up garbage have made their way up to supers, and we help them at every stage in terms of getting their supers licenses and starting to run jobs on their own. And these are guys who are neighborhood people and local hires who we've hired through local hiring programs mandated by, the city and or state. But yes, we're, I don't think we've ever been party to a community betterment agreement that has a requirement for local hiring, but I'd have to check that.
Right. Or whatever the community benefit agreement. It helps us to understand your tie-in, even though you talk about where you're located. The tie-in strongly to understanding or hearing what the community is saying around.
I can get you a number of our Bronx zip code employees, but
sure.
It's a high number. I don't know exactly what the percentage is.
I appreciate that.
What criteria are you considering for the management company? Educate me, because I mean,
What was the question?
being a developer, I don't know, like, what is the criteria that you look at in terms of like the finances that a management company needs to have, or the size?
There's a lot that goes into it. Some of it's relationship driven. A lot of it's experience driven. You can't manage affordable housing without having done it before, and that's a hard thing to say, but it's impossible to get into. You need to have a certain number of units under your belt in order to be able to go through the process of recertifying residents on an annual basis and dealing with, the non-payment and, as Susan mentioned earlier, helping tenants through the process, because some of it is carrot and stick, right? You've got to notify residents when they're falling behind and try and help them. But there's also, you've got to start legal proceedings. And so the criteria are vast. We work with 4 or 5 different managers throughout the city. Wavecrest is one of them. We'll probably issue an RFP that has, a bunch of different questions on it relating to who's going to be staffed on the job, how many jobs are those individuals working on, because that's really important, right? Susan, I don't know how many units you manage, but somebody works under her, somebody works under them, and it boils down to, who's managing the super, right? Because the super is going to be in charge of the staff at the building, and somebody's got to make sure that the super is doing what he needs to do, and that he's making sure that the 3 or 4 guys under him or 4 or 5 guys under him are doing what they need to do. And at the end of the day, it boils down to that, and making sure that, people are looking after the building in the way that you would want it looked after if you lived there. And that's kind of the challenge.
I'd like to see somebody with strong asset management, back office experience to keep the project in the best condition possible.
Yes.
I don't have more questions on my end, other than trying to figure out a time when it'll be a good idea to do like a site visit at some point, whenever that is appropriate, and if we needed to invite any community partners.
Yeah, so we talked about this with HPD, and HPD is going to be strongly working to make that happen as soon as possible. I have some questions regarding the where are we yet look at when the steps get into the environmental impact.
The site is going through the green fast track as it relates to the environmental impact. We are enrolling the site in the New York State Brownfield Cleanup Program. We submitted the application in October. The application was tentatively approved. Right now, the site consists of 4 or 5 zoning or tax lots. We're merging them. It makes DEC's life a lot easier if we don't amend our brownfield cleanup agreement with them, but that will ensure that the site is clean and the residents will all the environmental impacts will be taken care of as it relates to hazardous materials, and then DOH also certifies it for indoor air quality.
What was there before? What is there now?
Parking for the what's it called? 42nd. And then the trench. The trench is really where the issues were.
I know that there was an issue around the Merrill's dry cleaner issue, and what that remediation looks like, and the DEC and other agencies working with that. Do we So that, I guess we're gonna go, what, 10 feet or 10, how many?
Plus or
sit down, go
minus
down?
10, 12 feet down.
Yeah.
There'll be an SSDS system, which removes any soil vapor. Yeah, those are sort of the main parameters of it.
What are the amenities for building and apartment wide that are either proposed? I know that you all are still figuring
So
out how that looks.
community room, laundry room, rooftop terrace, package room are sort of the main residential pieces.
Right.
There's the rooftop and the outdoor terrace on the ground floor, and then in the apartments, they'll be pretty standard in terms of Caesar stone or solid surface countertops, fridge, induction range, and no dishwashers.
What about so we're looking at, so when you talk about we're going towards the green, are we doing silver, gold?
This is passive house.
Passive house. What are we doing as far as the is it a flood zone, non-flood zone in the area?
I don't believe it's a flood zone, but it will need to go through the SWIP.
Electric stoves for gas stoves?
Electric stoves.
And then so all the mechanics are in the basement
This
and
is,
then
this is
up top.
all electric.
Mechanics
water is probably hot. Combined hot water heaters probably up on the roof.
On top of the boiler and everything else is downstairs.
Well, no, the boiler would be up, but
so everything is
yeah,
up. So we're acting as if it's a flood zone because we're thinking that the basement can likely be flooded out in a horrible storm or.
Well, the electric
Yeah,
room will be
resiliency.
in the cellar probably, but other than that,
Right. And we talked about the staffing. I know it said 4 to 5. So the super is 1, the handyman is 2, and then the other
probably
3
two,
are
I think it's 2 other. I got to double check, but I think it's 2
2
additional
porters and stuff.
staffers.
So I want to add a piece about what my colleagues talked about in reference to garbage. We know that where you put your garbage, the time and where and what we believe we're doing a lot around the district, around the cleanliness of the district. We're working very hard and constantly doing walkthroughs and conversations with. If we get a solid commissioner at the Department of Sanitation to talk about what the hub looks like, so when people see when they coming home to this
Before
space.
this is done, the container rules will be in effect.
The container rooms will be, so all the garbage will be inside except until when it's put out for disposal the same day. So what you see is what your mental health is going to work and also coming home. So that's just something that does. And how many units? And then we talked about, I see all the units here. What's the typical amount of units on the floor? On a typical floor? The layouts, I guess.
So it varies as you go up the building, as you start having setbacks.
Sure.
On like a typical floor, we've got 7. And then
7.
or sorry,
you have
uh,
maybe you want to provide a table with what are the sizes of those and another time?
Yeah, that's a much better answer than what you're doing right now.
13 to 11 to 9, basically, as you go up in the building sets back. So 13 floors, 13 units.
Send them
Let's
that.
have it. And so like are the larger apartments upstairs and then
No,
all this
it's
stuff,
pretty
or
much-
just all mixed up
all
and
mixed up.
together. So you get.
And you said cameras would be in the hallways?
In the
Oh,
hallway.
good. Yeah, 'cause
Elevators,
there's-
hallways, trash
There's some big
rooms.
hallways here.
This is one of the very few buildings projects that I've ever dealt with. It's 3 elevators.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I wrote that down.
And this is a question for HPD. HPD, can
It's a
you
what, yeah.
can,
Well,
can
yeah,
HPD
well,
talk
yeah,
about
well,
can HPD talk about the financing? I think was it the Ella program? Can you talk about what that is and what the finances dictate to developers?
So Ella is one of our finance programs. We have the Ella Mix and Match, Open Door, the Sarah for seniors. We have 4, 5, 6 different financing programs for multi-family housing. The term sheets give all the specifications as to, what's required, what you have to do. They have to submit to our new construction finance staff, their proposed underwriting. The staff reviews it. There's usually some give and takes about some of these things. But it's very much itemized, how much are they gonna pay for staff, how much are they gonna pay for fuel, how much, basically whatever. And so, the best thing is, we can send you, or you can just look up the term sheet, in our website. It gives a lot of details about that. But the bottom line is always, you know, I always say that figuratively, the bottom line is literally the bottom line. That they have to show that the amount of money that they expect to be coming in and the amount of money to going out. And unlike the federal government, it has to be balanced.
What's the term on the building? 30 years
For affordability,
right?
We haven't had that discussion yet with HPD, but it's a minimum, I think, of a minimum of 30, but all of the UAP units are gonna be permanently affordable. So I think that's 30%, but I don't know off the top of my head. And given that it was city-owned land, it might be longer on everything else as well.
And the social services in perpetuity?
They're in our budget for as long as we're involved in the project.
And then does the partnership change over a period of time, or does it stay the same to the entire?
It stays the same.
Thank you, Chip.
So if we exit, we're all,
Everybody's out?
everybody's gone.
Do you have a syndicator? lined up?
Not yet. We'll go out to, a few.
And this will be income averaging, right? So
Yes.
there'll be, everybody will just have to do no full recertifications, just.
Yes.
I just want to say one more thing before we exit out, Chair. You know, the one of the primary
It's
other
just hard on the residents.
concerns.
It's brutal.
It's absolutely brutal.
I wanted to add the primary concerns of the board is that the terminology, people using buzzwords. Developers come to us all the time using buzzwords. No pun intended, Ted. HPD comes and uses buzzwords, affordability, and so.
Well, you use a word you don't understand.
And the cry from the community is affordable for who? You hear it, and there's always a fear around housing. You look at the most expensive bill that a person usually has on the kitchen table, and I say this a lot to try to bring it, is the rent. And because while we look at benefits, they have not changed in decades where that assist people to pay rent. And the concern has always been from former developer to developer is that these programs stay with the administration. Administration leaves these programs like FEPS and whatever who are not locked or baseline, and budgets go away, and landlords get feared about who's going to help folks pay for rent now. People, we have what I think in the thousands of people who applied for the recent open waiting list of Section 8, and under an hour when people will apply when that list opened up at 12:01 a.m. that day, and then it ended up closing almost immediately. A lot of people got turned away from that. So the concern is about when you talk about affordability, and then of course you talked about where you are almost immediately people who come in when you take HPD finances, you have to take folks off the Housing Connect. People usually don't pay rent the next month. So the concern is how do we keep truly the folks in our community housed in a way, how we're working to continue to find resources that the city may have to keep, whether it's low income tax credits or the other different programs that are out there to keep our residents hopefully in housing as much as possible. So I invite you to continue to work with the board as not as just another check that you go walk through when you have to do this process, but as a partner to want to continue to keep you whole as much as possible, whatever that means as developers, but also to help us to continue to find innovative ways working with, and to help keep the city, keep you guys in business, to keep our residents in place and continue to provide services. That's our priority as far as part of
One of the
appreciate
things that
that.
we haven't said is that all the units we rent stabilized. So they're coming in with a rent, each person will be coming in with a rent that supposedly they can do.
Sure.
And then, the same way as everybody else around the city.
I'm not going to say anything about the rent stabilization law because we have landlords here at the table, but some people feel that sometimes the rent guidelines board that some increases, sometimes some people want increases, some people don't want increases, whatever those increases look like. So I know it's a difficult, it's a dance, it's a delicate dance. I know there's stuff in
But
play.
somebody saying, but the increase is limited.
Sure.
Yes,
So
100%.
there's nothing market rate in this project.
Yeah. I agree. I'm just saying that some people even said that the last increase was too much of an increase, but that I wouldn't want to fight with any of the developers and landlords at the table.
And I appreciate you inviting us to stay involved, and we want to do so. And that's why Nostradamus is here. That's why this partnership's been around for a long time.
And Jessica and I have had passionate conversations through our lifetime knowing each other about different things. So
So
We agree, and then we don't agree all the time, so it's, you know.
I just want to say,
Thank you, Chair.
you guys say something?
Oh, I was just gonna chime in and say, I know we're talking about this project here, but I know we've had conversations about, especially going back to the comment about HPD using buzzwords and stuff, having more trainings in general that we can talk further about.
Sure.
Scheduling.
Yep, the chair is committed to that.
And I'd also like to, I think one of the things, because we've mentioned that this is going to be a passive house building a couple of times, and really what that's going to mean when all is said and done, it's going to be an extraordinarily energy efficient building, and is something that is going to be entirely electric. What that's going to do, because I know, right, I own a house here in the Bronx, and I just watch my Con Ed bills go up and up and up all the time. But the kind of deep energy sustainability that this building will have will really help insulate the residents and the building.
I didn't ask, do we have solar panels?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so it's gonna go around.
So the heat and air conditioning, are they gonna be, those
Sorry.
windows,
That's what we're planning at the moment.
I know.
Those are
expensive.
The Apocos, yeah. That's
That's
the
what you-
current plan. Again, we're who knows how long away from starting construction.
Yeah.
And what happens between now and then, but we are committed to building this with Passive House, and the technologies around that are rapidly evolving.
Right.
2 years ago, Apoca didn't have any competitors. Now there's a bunch. The other things as it relates to HPD and how utility allowances are calculated might enable some different heating and cooling systems, to have a further increase in efficiency, and that stuff will all continue to play out over the next couple of years.
I just want to say one thing about property management. As you guys consider, I know residents can be very upset with property managers, but I do think if there's ever an assessment of which ones are better than the other, in the factor, I think residents' opinions, who have to deal with them the most, is an important factor to be considered when we think about the four. I know it's always the same four in rotation.
I don't think CNC is on our list, given that I know that they're your current property.
No, they're
not.
They're not holding on because every day they want to fire somebody. But that's not me. This is a rental unit. This is a rental unit, and I want to say that takes to consider that as well.
Yes.
As well. But yes.
We get it. We try and solicit feedback from our residents.
It's mixed. You take it with a grain of salt.
Right.
Yeah, it's mixed.
Nobody likes the guy calling them for payday rent.
Okay. So thank you so much for showing up tonight. We truly appreciate it. What we are going to do is to summarize some of those questions and answers that from this discussion, so that way we can see if there's any other information that we want clarification. I think that based on the discussion tonight, you have a good understanding of what our community members are looking to see, so that when you come into the presentation for the full board, you can address some of those main topics, and also include more stuff that you think will be helpful. And please reach out if you feel that there's anything else that we can do to help. Thank you.
And we'll get back to you on the site visit.
Right, and hopefully the unit will be certified sometime soon. And, it might work out that it's going to be during the summer, but we'll see.
Do we have to vote? Because community
No,
board
this
is
is not voting.
Oh, this
Not
is
now.
So that's what
At the
I-
ULA
No, I
next
know
time.
not tonight. Oh, you're under
Yes.
the new city. Yes,
Yes.
we're still.
Yes,
Yes.
I'm just going to go through that. You ever, I think you don't know. So there's the 4 steps. First step is after it's certified, which basically means city planning has decided that the application is complete and says what it has to say. And then it goes to the community board. Both community boards hold a public hearing. And
Yeah.
we'll talk to you before each of the steps. We'll work that out
Yeah.
with you, and of course with the development team.
Yeah.
And then it goes to the borough president, who also holds a public hearing. And then it goes to the city planning commission itself. And then finally it goes to the city council.
Yeah.
And you'll be talking to the development team regularly. We always have prep meetings before each of those steps for all the projects that we do, so that we all know what everybody's gonna say and not say. And so then.
Did you say that?
He tries to prevent me from throwing HPD under the bus.
We hear it from the others.
I thought I missed everybody.
So hopefully, it'll be finishing you up by, I think we said early in the next year. One other thing that I didn't say is that in terms of talking about construction, the impact of construction, one of the things that I know I recommend, or actually request, to all development teams, is that after the closing, when they're about to start construction, or maybe a little before that, is that the construction team come to meet with this committee to talk about, what do you do? What do you do if you start seeing a lot of vermin? You start digging in the ground, you're going to see things. Was there a problem? Who the contact person is? All of that. I'm volunteering them that they will do that. When the time comes.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
That's
I
true.
want to
Like
say
noise
one.
complaint,
Yeah.
people working from home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask one more thing. I know HPD doesn't provide this, and you got 200 plus units. Have we thought about parking? What the impact is going to be?
Parking is not required by zoning.
Of course, yeah.
It is not something that it would be financed with HPD funding, and so if it were to be provided, it would have to be at a cost, and we don't typically operate parking garages.
Sure.
We have a number of garages that are, to HPD's credit, that are under the old program where we had to build garage space for zoning, and it sits mostly empty. So right now parking's not being considered.
Right, I just want to know if you thought about it, because you have 200 plus units. I know you got bike racks and alternatives to transportation. That's great.
It's
what's the impact?
We have good parking for people right now, but every now and then you're going
Yeah,
it's going to be really tight to get much parking in the cellar.
Sure.
And we just don't think it makes financial sense.
Sure.
We also, frankly, would rather the taxpayers' money be used to house people and not cars.
I'm with Ted on this one.
Ted wrote that on his way coming in.
No,
you said that more than once.
More than once, exactly, right? So that's
a whole bunch of
all right, Ted, you got.
people that have cars. I know. Not just guys.
But congestion prices is gonna make you guys think about it. Very soon, the stop bumpers are likely to come out.
So if I was on 69th Street, I'd be building a lot.
This site is right across the street from the police station.
And they take over 90% of the parking in that area.
It's not even your police station.
Yeah.
It's not even your police
It's
station.
the tip, right? It stops right there at the steps of the police station.
That's the dividing line between your board and board 3.
Right.
We tried many years ago. Actually many years ago, there was an intent to try to move that precinct because obviously that's not central to that district.
Right.
That's on the very edge of that precinct.
Right.
And so there was a hope way back. They even had a site that they were looking at, more central to Ward 3, but it just didn't work out. And so that's why they're still there. And I don't think any plans to consider anything else. We have spoken to them about maybe even a little bit of the land that's around them that is city owned. Maybe they can start using some of that. But no, they've been. The Aurora was originally a police parking lot. And we told them, we're sorry, but to the urban renewal site, they have to move, and we did.
Yeah.
So this is an urban renewal site as well.
They move everywhere else. Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Stay warm.
Yeah. Wasn't there a proposal to move, or it was the other police, right?
No, it's the other one.
That they did that.
In conversations that we're having as well about what we should be doing before the end of the year, the chair wanted us to think about what the goals should be for our committees. So I think this is not like written in stone, but it helps us to be organized, right? Because you cannot control what's going to happen in a year. There's just so much, and we are a small piece of a bigger puzzle. But I feel like if we can plan a few things and just like or just to follow up with some of the conversations we've had, this is the way that you do it when you're doing a strategic planning. So, like, what are we trying to accomplish, right? What is that strategic goal? Then you think about what are the resources or the input that you have, what are the activities that you want to do to reach that goal, what partners need to be involved, and what is the ultimate outcome. So, for example, if we think about trainings, that's an easy piece, right? So our strategic goal should be to educate and provide trainings to our members on key aspects of our work, like ULER, for example. That is a strategic goal. What resources do we have? Well, we have committee members, we have board members, we work with, we have places to facilitate these trainings, whatever. What are the activities? What do we want to do? Do we want to host a workshop, a webinar? Do we want to host a train the trainer where, like, you train someone and that person becomes a trainer that can then go and facilitate the training? Um, so stuff like that. What are the partners? HPD, the city council, whoever you want to think about, or it could be other committee like the policy and legislation committee. And what is the outcome? Well, we want to train all Community Board 1 members, make this resource available to all Community Board 1 members. We want to have that recording on a library that can be accessed for reference. You name it. That is an example of all the things that you have to come up with to accomplish a strategic goal. And then we think about any other goals that we might have as a committee. I would recommend having 4 or 5. That's a lot because we don't have the time for our staff
10 months.
is limited, the timing. But I would say that, look, if we're able to set 4 strategic goals, and out of those 4, we develop all 4 by the end of the year, perfect. If we are able to accomplish 3, but we respond to other things that emerge, fabulous.
Okay, so only because I can leave in 10 minutes for my condo board meeting. But one, I wanted to mention stuff that other people are doing, other people mean other committees. So like youth and education, they voted to have a job fair, a youth job fair. And I think that also kind of bridges with economic development for our youth. We were just talking about youth hiring. I don't know how we can partner with them, but that is
it's like having one of these
exactly
developers
come in
do the job fair,
and
right?
like show up and
Present it,
table.
right.
So that is someplace, like you said, manpower is limited. So when we know that one committee has already decided and we voted on this, maybe that's where we can, like talk about 4 goals, partnering and helping CB1 do a youth job fair is like something we can just like pull resources since like we don't have quorum.
So the strategic goal would be to increase the number of to expand opportunities for training for young people during within community board. So what resources do we have? Developers that can promote blah blah blah, that can give us information about availability opportunities, and then activities, job fairs. That's one, and we partner with the committee and we do it together because at the end of the day, it's community board 1.
Yes.
And then if there's something else that we might want to think about, right, we can list it as another activity and identify other partners. So that's
So what about doing something on education about Housing Connect and what's affordable housing? So that when our committee members.
Yes.
That goes back to the AMI situation.
Yes.
Right?
But somebody to really take a course on, like, almost to educate, because it is, I mean, I thought Anthony was 100% right. It is buzzwords, right? And if you're in the business, you kind of understand what those mean.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the people that are on the committees are just
but
people,
yet
they don't have an
vote.
education.
But yet they vote.
But they're voting, but try to give them education so that they can
that
vote
they
in a
can
better,
inform.
and make an
Exactly.
informed, thank you, I couldn't think of the word, an informed decision.
That's
I mean,
that's-
I would put those 2 things.
So I could add to that, Chair. The HPD has committed to. We did with Ms. Hemmons and City Planning on, I believe, ULUP and land use. Is that correct?
Yep,
Brenna?
it was on the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure and then some stuff on District 1.
Right.
And was it recorded? Because what I would love to do when we do those and the ones coming up in the future is if it's recorded, then every time we get a new hire, for those who could not attend, we can just send the link for people to review. I always felt like the onboarding for any community board is very weak because there's not training video or content.
Like they are in other boards.
I don't know if other boards have. I don't know. I don't know.
No,
what
I
they
think
do.
it's a good idea.
So, and then I wanted to add on to the agencies that are willing to do training for us that Leslie and I were thinking about in comms, trying to come up with things, not as you look as deep, but just AMI. I mean, you just go to, the internet is wide, but New York City has the whole AMI breakdown, what 30% looks like, yada, yada. And just breaking that down in a visual, condensed, you could, AMI is enough. You could do it in a 10-minute video, right?
So HPD has committed to assist with that. I just want to
We
say
could
that.
even use the BronxNet studio and create a video.
Yeah, and
No,
long
like-
videos versus short videos, but
Tina and Sanji could help us.
TikTok. I don't know
So
TikTok. but-
AMI, yo.
Yeah.
What? I'm sorry, one more time.
Sound very well. What's AMI, yo? And again, TikTok is still around.
If TikTok, honey, let's talk about it. June 19th around the corner. And I think that allows us cross collaboration with other committees and agencies. And I know that is something we've discussed. And the last thing, just so you know, we're spitballing ideas before I run out of here, is that Robert Clemente software.
Roberto.
And what's this guy, Pedro's job? What's his name?
Pedro Suarez is the CEO.
Bid director. Is that I'm very interested in like developing commercial, like who works in CB1, like restaurants and other opportunities. But we one thing we talked about is maybe developing Robert Clemente Circle into a market of some sort.
Roberto. People will be offended.
Sorry, what did I say?
Robert.
Yeah,
Mhm.
sorry, that's the guy who got
Roberto
killed at Mercy Park.
Clemente.
Yeah, Roberto Clemente. Sorry to talk about. So doing that as a market similar to what they did in, somebody tell me, in Queens, but like creating some economic development.
They do it in Fordham too, right? Like they even have the Bronx Night Market.
Yeah, I thought that ended. It got discontinued, but this
But
one works
in
with
an
DOT.
effort to clean it up.
Yes, to keep it activated.
To keep it
Activated,
to keep it-
continuously
right.
activated. It is in partnership with DOT in Queens. Stephen, what's the place called again? What's the place in Queens?
Corona Plaza.
What is it?
Corona Plaza.
Corona Plaza. Something similar to Corona Plaza.
I know what you're
Obviously,
talking
this is tiny, but it would
Okay,
keep
okay.
it activated on a regular basis. And I know activation would deter the activity we're trying to avoid, and that still falls under like economic development. Now, that is a very layered project and very long term. I don't know if it'll ever finish in a year, but that is something that we could start discussing. And I know in email we're talking about bringing the players in and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think there's a few stuff where like we want a strategic goal is to work closely with the bid on X, Y, and Z because a lot of the things they are the main drivers, right? They are the ones who coordinate that work, but we want to be able to work with them.
Well,
right?
actually,
Roberto.
That
what's
is
the
a
place
pro-
in Queens?
Corona Plaza.
Corona Plaza actually took a lot of community advocacy. And of course, they need, like, the bid is just a player. It was actually community led and had a lot of pushback. So it took a lot of elected officials to buy in. And so it actually wasn't bid led. They don't even have a bid there. I think they just have an economic
Yeah,
development
but
thing.
I think we are at a different stage, right? You just
Yes.
said it. We already have a bid, and stuff like that. SBS is there. I wonder what is the funding that they have to develop any projects.
No, it has
here.
the money came from DOT. I mean, here's the thing. This is completely spitball brainstorm. There's not enough research to even understand how Corona was implemented. Like, I don't have all that information, but I do know it was not a bid-led thing or economic development. I think that's what they have corp their thing. It was a
It was
very
more like a grassroots kind of.
yeah community
was it?
yeah because it was a vendor issue
Okay.
and they were trying to solve that issue. There was like a crowd control issue. There was NYPD's like, what am I doing with this problem? There's elected officials. It was like
I think that for our committee, we can discuss all of these problems, the things that are coming to us. My recommendation would be to look at strategic goals that where we have not necessarily more control, but things that we can see coming to fruition, so that folks feel that like sense of, hey, we completed, we achieved this goal, we surpassed this goal. And also looking at how we engage the folks that we have around this table. Because look, this was a very important presentation. A lot of people are not here, right? So that so many things don't fall on our lap. But going back to your point, if one of our strategic goals should be facilitating those conversations with our community members, with our and our partners, then we should look at it from that perspective. Let's say we are invested in doing more work at the plaza. I can remember the name of the plaza right now, right? We are invested. This is something that we want to see. How about we make these people to commit to hosting those conversations to talk about those plans here at the community board office? So we have an ear, and we kind of like help bring everyone together and drive the conversation, because the BID cannot do things alone. I mean, there's Sobro around there. We can provide help. We can commit, make Diana Ayala or whichever elected official, kind of like in Salamanca. We did a tour. We walked the streets to commit and say, how about we host a monthly meeting where we come together and we talk about the goals and we see where we are.
So
I
I
mean,
think,
specifically say about that.
Yeah,
Right.
about that.
Because that, I
yeah.
mean, that's a disaster for
It-
us, right? I mean, that's awful.
So
over
here's
there,
what I was
right?
thinking based on what you were saying, Paola. There are going to be, I think it's like big and little, like this job fair, youth job fair. That is something that we will see to its end and we can touch. And then there are things that are longer conversations that we don't want to be forgotten. Because if we don't stay on top of all these many players, so like the monthly meeting allows them not to forget this community and to stay on top of them. So I think some of the goals, you're right, we will see into fruition, engage, and we'll be like, yay, we did something, check. It feels so good to feel accomplished. And then I think there's some other things that it's a disaster. And if we don't stay on top of them, for them to all talk and don't stop talking until we come up with something, then it'll fall off people's radar as they have political ambitions
And
or
we
people
can say
move, yada yada.
short-term strategic goals
And long-term, yes,
strategic
yes,
goals.
yes,
It's
yes.
I
gonna
like
be
that idea.
Yeah, me too. That's me. I love that idea as well.
I also think that there are things that I think we have to keep on pushing with because we don't have, let's say the size of the apartments that we've talked about that almost every developer that comes,
Yeah,
right?
Just the best we got.
Even though they can go a little higher,
Okay.
right? They were at 700, they said maximum was 750.
Yeah, they did.
That's so, I mean, that could be something, if that's really something that's important to us as a community, as we said, that it's more important for us to have, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments.
Yeah,
That's a big deal. We have to stress that and then really make our vote, our decision mean something.
We have to,
right?
We have
I mean,
to.
And
they came in. I have to give them a lot of credit
Mhm.
in the sense that they did put
word on the street, and our reputation precedes us because they knew I was going to come here yelling at them. Poor Ted was on the phone with me for 90 minutes yelling about so many things, and I think he warned them. Like he says, I prep them before every meeting.
Oh yeah, I'm sure he did.
He did tell them they're shooting down voting stuff. So coming in at 42%, 2 or 3 bedrooms, I was amazed.
Yes,
I know maybe we got to push for the fours. I don't know. We're not pushing. Like I'm always interested in being a little bit aggressive, a little bit more.
We need to get these community board members in the, into the habit of like asking more, right? Like I feel like very often when these developers come and HPD, when they come to do these presentations, we are like, as opposed to like, okay, so but what else can we do? What
But
else can we?
That's the
accomplish?
trainings. If I always tell
I agree. I think it's the
training.
It's
I always
teaching people how
you
to
don't
do
know
it.
what to ask because you don't even know what's out there
How could it
available.
be?
to us.
How could it be possible for us to look at some good examples? I think we spoke briefly about it sometime. To look at good examples, not only of negotiation but good projects, right? What do these projects have that make them good, and how can we kind of like do our checkbox when these people come and do this presentation?
So one, I think that Anthony asked great questions. He knew what questions to ask. When Freddie was running this, Freddie, I ain't gonna say nothing. He know how to ask them questions. He knows the list of questions to ask. And so I think, like when I teach people, know your rights, they know, do you have a warrant, right? Like even though they don't know anything about criminal law, we've taught them enough to know they need to know how to ask these questions. So I think, Paola, like if we had housing presentations, these are the questions asked for HPD. These are the questions to ask for this, right? Then that helps me or helps everyone create negotiations. Then Susan knows they can do better because Susan knows the HPD square footage maximum. So she's like, oh, 700, you could do better than 700, you could do 750. But that's because she already knows what the curriculum, the requirements is. They know 30% have to be this, and they're like, we're above the 30%. But some of us didn't even know there was a 30% rule. You see what I mean? So we don't even know how above they are or below they are. And so I think that's when HPD's presentation is going to be helpful to help, and HPD we have to tell them the type of presentation we need because they can't do just one presentation doesn't work for all committees, but something that tells us these requirements because we know our goal is more family-oriented units for as cheap as possible. Some people want to fight for parking as well, but you know what I mean? Telling HPD what our goals are so they can make a presentation that shows us our rights so then we can be, because I can come, once I know them, I can come up, Susan and I can jot down a question sheet, questions to ask and why.
Well, I think Anthony can.
Because it was so.
We all can.
Yeah. And then that will help us come up with a community bargaining agreement. I thought that was a good question. Have you ever signed a community bargaining agreement? Can you show us whatever? He was very comfortable with the hiring. He was really good with the hiring. I didn't know what organizations he could partner with. I wanted to ask, what organizations have you partnered with for hiring?
That's a follow-up question.
Yeah.
I wanted to see what his answer.
Yeah, I didn't know any of the organizations, so I
would
don't want
be.
to ask something I don't know the answers to. Go ahead.
So real quick, I have an intern from NYU. She's created a draft of CBA for us.
Oh, good. For housing.
For housing.
Oh, good.
So I'll send that to you guys so you can just look at it and see what else we can change or ask for. But she did thorough research based off of our I'm sorry, what was the survey called? I'm sorry, I'm blanking right now. Our district service needs. She looked at the recent ones that the results that came out, and she based it off of our district as well using what's that data site that the city uses?
Open.
Yeah. So she used a lot of she did her research. So
Okay. Meeting
I mean,
adjourned.
Oh, good. I think this is great though. And Paola, though, we should come back with homework because, it's January. Before you know it, it's February.